Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're going to be talking about,
The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck by Mark Manson.
oh yeah, this is a good one. I really like this book.
Me too.
You suggested this one to us, and I gotta say,
Yeah.
it really kind of shakes up the way
Mm-hmm.
we think about happiness and success and everything. So
Absolutely.
let's see if we can extract some of those core
Yeah.
ideas, those real
Yeah.
aha moments
Totally.
that can really change the way you think.
Yeah, right off the bat.
Right.
What's so fascinating about this book is that it really challenges
Yeah.
that relentless positivity machine that we're all living in.
Yeah.
It dares to say maybe not giving a feck is a good thing.
Right, and it starts out with
Yeah.
this character that you might not expect, Charles Bukowski.
Oh, yeah.
So this writer spent decades facing rejection,
Hmm.
right? Stuck in this mind-numbing postal job,
Hmm.
wrestling with alcoholism, all these things.
Wow.
He ended up having "Don't try" etched on his tombstone. So,
That's profound.
right, it's like this really interesting paradox.
Yeah.
He was deemed a failure for decades, right?
Totally, by all conventional standards.
But then he found fame.
Yeah.
So, what's going on there?
It is a paradox because here's a guy, his work was considered crude,
Yeah.
offensive to the mainstream
Right.
for years, and then later he's celebrated.
Yeah.
He embodies this
Yeah.
kind of life that most people would,
Right.
steer clear of.
Run away from.
Right.
Okay, so let's break down this idea of don't try.
Yeah.
Because it's not like he's saying don't do anything right.
Right.
The book argues that Bukowski's success
Mm-hmm.
wasn't from this, burning ambition to be this great writer.
Yeah.
But it actually came from this raw acceptance of who he was.
Totally.
Flaws and all
Yeah.
he wrote with this brutal, unflinching honesty
Yeah.
about his own kind of messed up life.
He wasn't trying to be this polished, idealized version of himself.
Exactly. And so his brilliance wasn't in overcoming this, heroic struggle,
Yeah.
which we usually kind of think is how you achieve brilliance.
Right.
It was in this utter lack of pretense.
Yeah.
He laid bare his vulnerabilities,
Yeah.
his shortcomings, without apology.
Yeah.
And so don't try in this light is about the radical act of accepting yourself.
Yeah.
The raw self.
Right.
All the messy parts.
Yeah.
Which paradoxically unlocks,
Yeah.
genuine connection.
Right.
And even success.
So by not chasing this manufactured image of success,
Yes.
he actually tapped into something real.
Yeah,
And that resonated with people.
for sure.
And that takes us into this idea of kind of accepting the negative, right?
Totally.
And the book talks about this thing called the feedback loop from hell.
It's so good.
So have you ever felt this before?
Yeah. I mean, who hasn't?
Like you feel bad and then you feel even worse for feeling bad in the first place.
Exactly. It's like a spiral of negativity.
Right.
The book gives these examples, worrying,
Right.
feeling guilty for feeling guilty.
Right.
Or being sad that you feel sad or alone.
Right.
And you're just like,
Yeah.
why am I doing this?
Right. It's like your inner critic has its own inner critic.
Yeah.
It's like meta misery.
Totally.
And it seems like this is even more amplified in today's world, right? This
Yes.
hyper-connected world
Yes.
where we're constantly bombarded with everyone's highlight reels.
Yeah, we're constantly exposed to these idealized images online.
Right.
And it makes you feel like something's wrong with you.
Right.
If you're not perpetually happy.
So if everyone else seems to be living this perfect life
Yes.
and you're not feeling that way,
Yeah.
it's easy to think you're broken.
Yeah, it creates this unrealistic yardstick.
Yeah.
We're all comparing ourselves
Right.
to these curated bests
Right.
and then feeling inadequate.
Yeah. When our own messy realities don't measure up.
So that's where this whole idea of
Yes.
not giving a thought comes in.
Yeah.
And it's important to clarify, right? The book isn't saying
Yes.
become an emotionless robot.
Right.
Don't care about anything.
Yeah.
It's more about
It's about accepting.
accepting
Yeah.
that the world is inherently flawed.
Yes.
It always has been.
Yeah.
Always will be.
Yeah.
And that acceptance, the book argues, is almost like building this shield
Right.
against this pressure
Yeah.
to be positive all the time,
All the time.
right?
Yeah.
And the book argues that maybe the reason we're all struggling with this so much is because we've almost become victims of our own progress.
Yeah.
So think about it.
Yeah.
We have more comfort,
Right.
more opportunities than ever before.
Yeah.
Yet anxiety and depression are
Skyrocket.
all-time highs, right?
It's crazy.
It's like we have all our basic needs met,
Yeah.
but we're still facing this, like,
Yeah.
existential crisis.
Yeah. An existential crisis. We have so much
Yeah.
that we don't know what to care about anymore.
So we have all this stuff.
Yeah.
So many options that we're almost paralyzed.
Right.
And the book explores this concept from the philosopher Alan Watts called the backwards law.
This is a good one.
So get ready to have your brain
It's a mind bender.
unpressled.
Yes.
Okay, so the backwards law
Yeah.
essentially says that wanting positive experiences too much can actually create negative ones.
Right.
And weirdly, embracing negative experiences can lead to positive growth.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive.
Right.
But it's like the more you chase feeling good, the less satisfied you become.
Right.
Watts argued that this pursuit highlights the very thing you lack.
Yeah.
Right. So good examples, the more desperately you want to be rich, the more poor and unworthy you feel,
Right.
the more you crave being sexy and desired, the uglier you might perceive yourself. And the more you desperately want to be happy and loved, the lonelier and more afraid you might become.
Yeah.
Like, you've ever noticed that?
Yeah, it's like
when you try to force yourself to fall asleep, the harder you try,
right.
the more awake you are. It's
Yeah.
the same principle.
Yeah, it's like that constant striving is almost reinforcing
Yes.
that you don't have what you want.
Totally.
Which brings us to this idea that you only have a limited number of fucks to give in your life.
Yeah, limited fucks to give.
Right.
The book really emphasizes
Right.
the finite nature of our attention, our emotional energy, our care.
Right.
And if we're going around giving a fuck about everything and everyone without any conscious thought, we're going to be totally drained and frankly fucked, as the book puts it.
So the subtle art isn't about not caring about anything.
Right.
It's about being intentional.
Exactly.
About where you direct your care.
Yeah.
Your fucks.
Your fucks, right.
Your limited fucks.
Based on your values.
Yeah, what matters to you?
And this is like an ongoing process, right?
Yeah, it's not a one-time fix.
It's not like you figure it out and then you're done.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got to give a fuck about the right things.
Yes. And the second subtlety is that to not give a feck about adversity, you first have to give a feck about something more important than that adversity.
Yeah.
So the book uses this example that I think is really vivid and memorable of this elderly woman who's getting incredibly upset with a cashier over a small coupon.
Like having a meltdown over...
like 30 cents.
30 cents!
It's like, why are you so invested in this tiny conflict?
And the book suggests that maybe the reason she's so invested is because she doesn't have something more meaningful to focus on.
Exactly. Maybe she's lonely.
Maybe she feels overlooked.
Yeah.
And this is like this tiny little battle that gives her this sense of purpose, however misguided.
Okay, so it's like our attention goes to what we deem important.
Exactly.
And as we get older, we gain this wider perspective, right?
We do.
Life teaches us that maybe the things we obsessed over didn't really matter that much.
Yeah, like opinions that felt life or death.
Yeah.
Fade rejections can actually open doors to better things.
Yeah.
And, people aren't scrutinizing our every move as much as we thought.
It's like we learn to tune out the noise
Yeah.
and focus on the signal.
Absolutely.
And the book argues that this process of learning what not to give a feck about can lead to something called practical enlightenment.
So this isn't like the mystical float off into nirvana kind of enlightenment.
Right. It's not like you're going to be levitating.
No, it's about becoming comfortable with the unavoidable reality of suffering. Life, by its very nature, includes failures, loss, regrets, and eventually death.
Right.
And so the book says once you accept this shit,
Right.
you develop a resilience.
Yeah.
The only way to really navigate pain is to learn how to bear it,
Right.
not to constantly try to avoid it.
So it's not about achieving some transcendent state.
Yeah.
It's about this grounded acceptance
Yeah.
that suffering is part of the deal.
Right.
And resisting it
Is more painful than accepting it.
is more painful.
Yeah.
Okay, and the book illustrates this with the story of a sheltered prince
This is a good one.
who's raised in complete luxury,
Yeah.
shielded from any hardship.
Never had to face anything difficult.
And then one day he steps outside the palace
Yeah.
and is confronted with the reality of human suffering.
Yeah, sees it for the first time.
And it just shatters his whole worldview.
It shatters his worldview.
Yeah.
He can't reconcile what he's seen with his privileged existence.
Yeah.
And in a very human response, he blames his father for the very protection that he was given.
Right. He thinks it's his father's fault.
Yeah.
That he feels empty.
Yeah, he thinks it's the riches that made his life feel empty.
And so he makes this drastic decision.
Yeah.
Doesn't just run away.
Right.
He gives up his royalty.
Yeah.
Family, everything he owns.
Right.
And chooses to live on the streets.
Yeah.
Embraces this life of extreme self-denial.
Yeah, starving himself, living in squalor.
So he thinks that suffering will unlock some truth.
He thinks this intense suffering will lead to some profound truth.
But after years of this self-imposed misery,
he
comes to the conclusion.
What do you think the conclusion is?
That suffering for the sake of suffering is miserable.
Yeah.
So it doesn't magically grant you enlightenment.
Doesn't give you meaning of life.
Yeah.
So just like excessive wealth didn't bring him fulfillment, the book argues that suffering without purpose is equally meaningless.
And he realizes that this grand gesture was just as misguided as his father's overprotection.
Yeah, so it's not one extreme or the other.
Right.
It's not avoiding suffering or seeking it out. It's finding meaning and purpose even when things are tough.
Right, and the book introduces this character I kind of love.
I love this
Disappointment Panda.
Disappointment Panda with his like slightly deflated demeanor and his superpower of telling you the harsh truths you need to hear but don't want to hear. He drops these uncomfortable bombs.
Truth bombs,
Like making a lot of money might feel good, but it won't magically make your kids love you.
Ouch.
Or like what you think is friendship is actually you constantly trying to impress people.
Oh. He's like the brutally honest superhero we all need.
We need him.
Right.
We all need a little Disappointment Panda in our lives.
And through Disappointment Panda, the book argues that we suffer for a reason.
Yeah, biologically useful reason.
It's like nature's way of telling us.
Yeah, it's nature's way of nudging us to change.
To change.
We're wired for dissatisfaction and insecurity because that's what has driven innovation and survival.
Throughout history.
Yeah.
So that itch of dissatisfaction isn't a flaw.
It's not a bug, it's a feature.
It's a feature.
Right.
It keeps us striving.
Keeps us striving, building, adapting.
Right.
Pain is our body's most effective way of saying, hey, pay attention.
Even like stubbing your toe.
Yeah, right.
It's like immediate action.
Yeah, like, ow.
Right. And just like physical pain signals.
Yeah.
Something's wrong physically.
Yeah.
Psychological pain is the same for mental and emotional well-being.
Yeah. So it indicates imbalance.
Right.
And sometimes emotional pain like rejection or failure can be beneficial.
Right.
It teaches us to avoid repeating mistakes.
It's like a feedback mechanism.
Right.
Which is why the book expresses concern about a society that tries to avoid all discomfort.
Right.
So by trying to avoid those healthy doses of pain, we lose the valuable lessons that teach us.
And we become disconnected from reality.
Right.
The book uses this analogy.
Okay.
Warren Buffett's money problems
are
completely different from a homeless person's money problems.
Right.
But the point is, problems never disappear.
Yeah.
They just evolve.
Right. They take different forms.
Yeah.
So we're not saying just be miserable all the time.
No.
Right?
Right. But also don't try to avoid.
Don't avoid it.
All pain.
All pain.
Right.
The book also cautions against letting our emotions completely dictate our actions.
Totally.
So like basing all of your decisions on feelings.
Right.
Without any rational thought.
Without reason.
That's a recipe for disaster.
Disaster, right?
The book uses toddlers and dogs.
Right.
Who sometimes shit on the rug.
Yes.
Right?
As an example.
As an example.
Yeah. So like.
Emotions are valuable signals.
Yeah.
But they shouldn't be the sole drivers of our decisions.
Of our decisions.
Right.
And this connects to this other common pitfall
okay.
of being in love with the idea of a result, but not enjoying the process.
Right.
The author talks about his own fantasy of becoming a rock star.
I love this example.
Like the full-on rock star fantasy.
Grilling crowds.
Yeah, boring crowd.
Rock and roll lifestyle.
The lifestyle, the whole thing.
Right.
But he realized that he loved the idea of it, but he didn't like the actual work involved.
No, he didn't like the process. The long hours of practice.
Yeah.
The hauling equipment.
The logistics, the management.
Logistics, he was enamored with the summit.
Yeah. But he had no desire to climb the mountain.
And the book kind of challenges this idea.
Yeah.
That means he's a failure.
Right.
Sometimes realizing
you
don't like the process.
That you genuinely dislike the process.
It's a good insight.
It's a valuable insight.
Yeah.
And this leads to the topic of entitlement.
Okay, so how does that connect?
So entitlement, the book argues, creates this narcissistic bubble that distorts reality to reinforce a sense of superiority or victimhood.
Okay.
Right, so entitled people, they interpret everything as either proof of their awesomeness or as a personal attack.
Yeah.
And they'll fiercely protect this illusion.
Right.
Sometimes resorting to harmful behavior to do so.
And eventually, reality will punch a hole in that bubble.
Reality has a way of puncturing that bubble.
And then the underlying issue.
And then the underlying issues resurface. With even greater intensity.
Right. And the author tells this story from his own life.
Yeah.
Called The Locker Incident.
The Locker Incident.
So this is where he is this rebellious teenager.
Right.
Gets caught with marijuana hidden in his secret compartment.
In his backpack. Classic.
And this is like a real things fall apart moment for him.
Yeah, a real wake-up call.
Leads to expulsion from homeschooling. This whole upheaval.
Major shift.
For his life.
Yeah, and it was a harsh but necessary consequence for his actions.
Okay, and so this connects to the book's exploration of the two sides of entitlement.
The two sides.
Okay, so we've got the...
Okay, so there's the...
I'm amazing, you're worthless.
I'm amazing, you suck, I deserve special treatment.
Oh,
and then there's the...
And then there's...
I suck, you're amazing, I deserve special treatment.
Right.
So it's like opposite ends of the spectrum.
It seems like the opposite.
Right, but the book argues they both stem from this selfish core.
Right, so you're either on top of the world.
You're either on top of the world or the victim.
Or the victim.
Right.
And it seems like...
And it just depends on the circumstances.
Entitled people kind of swing between these two...
Utterly.
Extremes.
Yes.
Right.
And so the crucial step to breaking free of this is to acknowledge that our problems, no matter how difficult they feel, are not uniquely special.
Okay.
This helps us stop wallowing in self-pity and start taking ownership.
So it's like recognizing that you're a problem.
Yeah.
Isn't this
is it special?
Special thing that only you have.
Right.
And the book notes. This trend.
A concerning trend.
Of decreasing emotional resilience.
Yeah. Less resilience.
Yeah.
And increasing selfish demands.
Yeah. Particularly among younger generations.
Yes. Potentially linked to overprotective parenting. And technology.
So it's this irony that we're more connected than ever.
Yeah, we're more connected digitally than ever before.
But entitlement
is through the roof.
Through the roof.
Yeah.
And the book suggests that technology might be fueling those insecurities.
It could be allowing them to fester.
Right.
Yeah, more freedom of expression online seems to lead to less tolerance for different viewpoints.
Like the opposite of what you'd expect.
Yeah, you think it'd be the opposite.
Right. And then
the
more comfortable we are materially, the more entitled we feel.
Yeah. For even better conditions.
Yeah.
So this ties into this constant barrage from mass media and marketing, which promotes this culture of exceptionalism.
Right. We all have to be exceptional.
Right.
So we're bombarded with these
images of the extraordinary.
Right.
So we feel inadequate.
Inadequate.
And we think we need to be extreme.
Right.
In some way to matter.
To matter.
Yeah.
Okay, so that leads to some really interesting stories.
Yeah, like the story of Onoda and Suzuki.
Okay, so tell me about this.
So this Japanese soldier who kept fighting World War II for decades after it ended.
Wow, he was completely
unaware. Yeah.
Okay.
And there's this eccentric man, Suzuki, who sought him out.
Okay.
Along with a panda.
A panda.
And the abominable snowman.
What?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a bizarre story.
It's a surreal story.
But it highlights how humans can dedicate their lives to these pointless or even harmful pursuits.
Right. Driven by ingrained beliefs.
Yeah.
Or a misguided quest for validation.
Right. So you have Onoda clinging to his outdated orders for 30 years.
Yeah.
And Suzuki chasing these
elusive fantasies.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And this makes you question the why behind our actions.
Why are we doing this?
Right. And the book encourages us to repeatedly ask why.
Yeah, ask why.
About things that bug us.
About the things that bother us.
And this can help us uncover...
Yeah. What are our values?
Our values.
And the metrics.
And the metrics.
Yeah.
So the author gives an example.
Okay, what's the example?
His brother not responding to his texts.
Oh, yeah.
So by repeatedly asking why that bothered him, he realized
that his core value was...
Yeah, that his value was brotherly connection.
Right.
And his metric was frequent communication.
Right, so he had this expectation of frequent contact.
Yeah, and so by rigidly adhering to that metric, he was setting himself up
for disappointment.
Right. So it's about realizing that sometimes our feelings of inadequacy come from these arbitrary standards.
We make them up.
That we've created for ourselves.
Yeah, right? Totally.
And sometimes what looks like a failure by one set of standards can be a success.
Can be a success.
But a different set of standards.
But another set of standards.
And the book tells the story of Pete Best.
Oh, yeah. I love Pete Best.
The drummer who got fired.
Famously fired from the Beatles.
From the Beatles, right?
Right before they become global icons.
Right before they made it big.
Yeah.
So this seems like a huge failure.
Yeah.
By any...
By one standard?
Standard?
Yeah.
What?
But it's a powerful reminder that fame and fortune aren't the only measures of a fulfilling life.
Right.
So while getting kicked out of the Beatles was a major setback and led to a dark period for him, he eventually found happiness in a more grounded life with his family.
So his values shifted.
They shifted.
Right? He started appreciating.
Yeah, appreciating what he had.
What he had. Yeah. And he continued making music.
Yeah, on his own terms.
But not as a Beatle.
Right.
Right? Yeah. So what seemed like this monumental failure actually opened the door for a different
kind of contentment. Yeah.
And this brings us to this distinction the book makes between poor values and